Hi guys, today we're taking a look at a really interesting article and video that discuss what went wrong with Plants vs Zombies 2 It's About Time. The article posted last week on GameSpot discusses an interview with the original PvZ2 producer Matt Johnston, who talks about what was going on behind the scenes at PopCap in the wake of the original game's huge success. The interview itself comes from a section of the oral history of PopCap Games video by Min Max Show, which is basically this gigantic 4-hour long video that has exclusive interviews with tons of existing and past PopCap employees. It's super interesting and in a very podcast style, so you can just put it on in the background. If you want to check it out, there is a link in the description. So, like I mentioned, Matt Johnston was the original PvZ2 producer, and he had worked on the Xbox version of the original PvZ, so he was quite fitting for the job. During this time, the future PvZ2 team had been working on PvZ Adventures, which as we know didn't go quite to plan as the game got shut down, which is pants, as I'm pretty sure literally every comment from you guys about PvZ Adventures I've had seems to be really positive. But anyway, the morale in the team was pretty low at the time, and this was where Johnston got asked to step in as a producer. But even with the new producer, the PvZ2 team had felt a bit on their own as George Fan had gone to work on a new game and the other original founders had kind of stepped back. Johnston reckoned it had something to do with the original PvZ's astronomical success potentially overwhelming them and leading them to want space or less involvement with the sequel. So yeah, the team kind of felt they didn't have the full support they needed, but Johnston made it clear that the OG creators would still help out. They didn't completely abandon PvZ or anything like that. Later down the line, Johnston was eventually given direction from the leadership team that they wanted the game to be free to play. So the team were essentially under a lot of pressure to make sure PvZ2 kept the core of what made Plants vs Zombies, but also made the game free to play. But as we later discovered, these two things didn't quite work together as PvZ wasn't built to be free to play. Johnston describes it like this.
The game is like this interwoven, meticulously hand-balanced by George Fan set of interdependent components. So like every plant has a zombie that it depends on for that balance. And like just making sure that, you know, that whole thing was woven together in that like perfect lineage and that perfect experience was just a magic trick that, you know, you can't mess with. Yeah. So we were kind of strong about that. It's like, it was one of the things we learned. We tried actually, and we learned that you can't do that without, I think, disappointing a whole bunch of people.
Naturally, both Johnston and the rest of the team thought free-to-play really wasn't a good idea, so their suggestion was to introduce this concept of plant food that players could use to make levels easier, and if they wanted to, packs of plant food would be available to purchase for real money. So yeah, initially they were going for something that compromised just creating like a direct sequel with updated graphics and new plants, etc., but also migrating into the more modern gaming market with the injection of small optional microtransactions, especially as they were starting to become increasingly popular, particularly for mobile apps. They were also looking at introducing content packs, which presumably is referring to like the new worlds as either paid or free DLC. But this is where it starts to go down south for PvZ2. Following the idea put forward, PopCap was soon acquired by EA, and it wasn't long before Matt Johnston was visited by the CEO of EA at the time, John Riccitiello. And whilst the pair got on well during their meeting, Riccitiello drops an absolute bombshell of an idea apparently suggested by one of his kids. And that idea was rentable plants. What if you could rent plants for a little while as a consumable item? Excuse me? What?
Renting plants? Now this is gaming.
And obviously with the CEO of EA thinking this was a good idea, I mean, he's gonna have the final say no matter what. Not much they could have done. If he wanted that to happen, it was gonna happen. So there you have it, everyone. We now know we have some little rich kid to blame for the downfall of PvZ2. But to be honest, I don't think this is true. Like, come on, you expect me to believe your son suggested rentable plants? Like, I'm sorry, most kids, even adults, don't understand the concept of money, let alone suggest clever ways to integrate microtransactions. This to me feels like one of those asking for a friend moments where we all know this friend of yours is clearly just you. Anyway, Johnston then discussed that if they did want to go down this route of rentable plants and all these microtransactions, it should have been built from the ground up as a free-to-play game as its own separate thing, so it wouldn't mess with the core of what PvZ was. Unfortunately, soon after all of this, Johnston was taken off the PvZ2 project, replaced, and then later asked to leave the company. Now, I know many of us would love to rip into EA immensely at this point. I mean, most of us do it on a daily basis anyway, so go big or go home is what I say. However, this is not the full story, as later in the video there was an additional interview with John Vici, the co-founder of PopCap, who touched on this topic. Vici talks about how EA would have probably been okay at the idea of PopCap creating a premium game, i.e. Plants vs Zombies 2, while separately working on a free-to-play Plants vs Zombies from the ground up so it wouldn't break the original amazing formula. This is because they would be building it as a purely free-to-play game, which obviously works a lot differently to premium games. However, Vici says that strangely, even for PopCap, which he had a big part to play in, obviously, didn't back the PvZ2 team on this issue. When Ben Hansen, the interviewer, asked why this was the case, this proved to be quite an uncomfortable question for Vici. Take a look at this clip.
I think it's incentives, right? It's contradictory incentives to some extent, but it wasn't just the manager. In this case, I think it was almost stupid. I mean, I was part of the management side, so it's like it was stupidity. It was being blind, is wishing for something to exist that didn't exist. It was like if that didn't happen, what was going to happen to PopCap as we knew it was going to go away. And so there was also like what's PopCap's place within EA? They bought us to be the Pixar. We didn't deliver was one story. Was that the truth? And then, or they bought us to be the Pixar, but then we stopped being the Pixar.
Essentially, he describes there were a lot of factors that resulted in the questionable decision regarding PvZ2 being free to play, including stupidity, anxiety of Plants vs Zombies just being a one-hit wonder, greed, and a whole bunch of other things. And despite PvZ2 being the most downloaded game ever on the App Store during its launch week, behind the scenes everything wasn't quite as hunky-dory as we might have thought, with a lot of frustration in the team resulting in a lot of toxicity. Vici leaves us with some final thoughts that everything that went on behind the scenes was, and I quote, really un-PopCap. Independent PopCap would have never pushed a game to be what it wasn't. It would have always tried to figure out how do we help the game be what it is. Overall, I think what was discussed in these interviews is actually quite sad. Like, there was clearly a lot of negativity and poor decision making that went on behind the scenes from many of the upper management in both PopCap and EA. Despite PvZ2's relentless monetization and MTX, it was still a really great game and really took a lot of the original PvZ and expanded on it. I mean, it's still getting updates today, and the number of downloads it's had speaks for itself. However, the decisions made during PvZ2's development really hindered it from being an even bigger success. The monetization held the game back. It goes to show that you can't turn a game that was designed to be a premium paid game into a free-to-play game without breaking some of its core components. I also think this has highlighted that extremely rapid growth of a small company and insane popularity of a game can often do more harm than good. Anyway guys, that's about it for today's video. As always, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and if you do want to support the channel further, check out my Patreon page by clicking on screen now or through the link in the description. But other than that, I will see you in the next one. Okay, thanks guys, bye.